I've never remembered a situation where schools and a conference were there was that much tension, angst, words stated publicly that I thought that there was no return. But obviously, um, the money and the power and protecting your interests, trump all that eventually. But we got a situation with the ACC where they've got a new deal. They've got $19 million in exit fees, and that's going to come down uh, by about $18 million per
every year.
year to where it
Yep.
caps at 75. So it's really manageable for these teams going
Yeah.
forward. So the ACC, in my view, Greg, has spared itself for a limited period of time, but the time is running out. I ran some numbers that I ran by some people kind of similar to you that I really respect that know this sort of thing. And I went through the TV ratings for the last 2 years and put a percentage together that went with the 60-40 split of the 60% based on revenue and TV ratings and the 40% that's equally distributed. And it just really broadens out the amount of money that these schools are going to make that on the high end, Florida State in particular, Clemson, et cetera. So what do you think that leads us to? Do you think at the end of the next television contract, those schools are going to look for the out? And, I'm not asking for a prediction because it's been difficult for any of us to make predictions about what's going to happen. But, what did that deal tell you about what we can expect in the future?
I honestly, Mark, I think it's going to happen way before the next media negotiate. Yeah.
Okay.
In fact, it's not imminent because there is so much going on in college football to where the four power commissioners are working on this with the federal government. They're all just went there. They're working out the college football playoff. There's governance stuff. They got so much stuff to get through. So I don't think it's imminent. I don't think it's this year, but I think 26 and 27 we get movement. I have stayed away from predictions all the way up until April 8th, 2 days ago. I really believe, Mark, I could change, and if I'm wrong, I'll take the big L here on the Mark Rogers show, or if things change, I'll let people know. But I really think when the SEC moves on this, that they're going to move large, and they're going to move. It's going to be a transformation of their conference once again, just like when they brought in Oklahoma and Texas. So we talked about this last year, Mark, and I did a report on June 15th of last year in which I got raked over the coals by many, many people out there, as you know, Mark. But 6 weeks later, those reports came out, and it was accurate in that Florida State and Clemson were not the number one targets of the SEC. They were not the number one targets of the Big Ten, but they're highly valuable brands. They're going to get to where they need to get to, but they're not the ones that the Big Ten and the SEC were looking at first. But recently I have, as I talk to people, Mark, as you know, I think the SEC, when they move, they're going to go big, and I think they're going to get what they want. And I think what they want is the SEC presidents they're going to want Virginia, North Carolina, for a lot of different reasons. I don't want to take up your time on your valuable show, but there are reasons they want those two schools for student apocalypse. The student apocalypse that's going to be happening, doing their, increasing their footprint, international students. There's a whole bunch of reasons why they want North Carolina, Virginia. And I think to help grease the skids with ESPN and other reasons, I think they're going to bring in Florida State and Clemson. I think it's going to be a huge 4-team expansion by the SEC. And I think they're going to, I don't think the SEC is going to play within, I don't think they're going to do a marginal move. I think it's going to be a massive move. And then that next question is, then what happens to Notre Dame? Because that ACC scheduling agreement goes away. the ability for Notre Dame to fulfill their obligations to NBC gets much difficult. I just redid, I did an episode and a live show on an article in June of 2024 where Bavacqua, the new athletic director at that time, was already saying it's getting harder and harder for us to fulfill our obligations to NBC and what would happen if Florida State and Clemson left the conference. Well, 10 months later, Florida State and Clemson have won a massive victory in the courts. There is a cost certainty when to get out of the ACC. The ACC would have to accept their check. You got the SEC sitting over there, Mark. I just want to get this out. The SEC is sitting there pro rata with ESPN. So the teams that they bring in, ESPN's got to pay them full freight. 17, 18, 19, 20. The SEC is seriously looking at going to 9 conference games. The SEC is seriously looking at an aggressive scheduling agreement with the Big Ten. The SEC is aggressively looking at playing games because they're going to probably get the 4 automatic qualifiers. The SEC is looking at a more aggressive bowl tie-in between the SEC and the Big Ten. So this is all going to create another media negotiations with ESPN. You've got, if you brought in Clemson and Florida State, the SEC would get a little bit more money in the playoff distribution because Clemson and Florida State have been to the playoffs. They won the championship over the last 10 years. The SEC's percentage would go up. So I think Clemson and Florida State, what I have heard, Mark, lately is for the SEC presidents to get what they want with Virginia and North Carolina, which is what Pete Thamel has said, which was Heather Dinich has said, which is Brett McMurray. They've all reported the same thing because they're all getting leaked the same information because it happens to be true. That's what the SEC presidents want. And for them to get what they want, there's a there's a belief out there that they're probably going to bring in Florida State and Clemson to get it all done. And then the next question is Notre Dame. How can they continue to do what they're doing without that scheduling agreement with the ACC? Because if the SEC is going to 9 conference games and they're going to have a crossover game with the Big Ten, how many games are Notre Dame going to get with the big brand schools going forward?
So, Greg, it's been my thought ever since this started to unravel with Oklahoma and Texas, and certainly you're the guy in this area, so correct me if I'm wrong, is that what seemed to be the incentive for the SEC and the Big Ten was one of 2 things. Either assessing the field and saying, we've got 2 more schools out there that bring value to us, or 5, or whatever the case might be. Mm-hmm. Assessing each school and saying, do they bring us value in whatever areas? We start with money, of course.
Yeah.
That we can add. Incentive number 2 would be, the SEC went out and grabbed Oklahoma and Texas. They're already better than we are. We need to make a counter move. And obviously we saw USC, UCLA, and then Washington, Oregon kind of hung out there. And there were all sorts of speculation after they applied and were accepted. So my thought there is then, does the Big Ten, yes, aggressively go after Notre Dame? Of course, Notre Dame's going to continue to do what's in the best interest of Notre Dame. You know, this is not the NFL where the owners get together and they do what's the best for the common good. You know, each conference acts in its own interests, and that's not good always for the sport. If somebody could take over this sport, I don't know if you're up for the commissioner's job, Greg.
No, but, nope. They've got me blacklisted, Mark. Nope. The Big Ten has me blacklisted for one, but go ahead.
You would have certainly my consideration to take that on. But, just in regards to, I'm looking at Notre Dame and Miami possibly being a counter move for, I've always felt that the Big Ten had everything, check the boxes. They have everything accept a recruiting footprint that is anywhere close to the SEC. And that them driving a stake in Florida, planting a flag in Florida would be huge.
And that's part of what that's part of what I talked about on April 8th. It was the Miami Notre Dame situation.
Okay.
So Miami, University of Miami is an interest. So I was brought all this information just recently about how Miami became AAU a couple years ago, and so they do about $400 million, $460, whatever the number is, when it comes to research expenditures. About 175 million of that is National Institute Health funding. And Miami is big on like genetics research and things like that. Exactly what the Big Ten universities, Michigan, for one, really wants in the conference. Probably the big reason why Miami became AAU. Probably the big reason why the Big Ten presidents voted Miami AAU. So Miami has been, looked at, poked and prodded, turned over, evaluated in so many different ways and reasons. And the presidents believed they should be AAU. They became AAU. By the way, so did Notre Dame at the same time. So in Miami's market, Miami-Dade is about 1/6 of the GDP of the whole entire state of Florida. The national advertisers of Fox would love to get into that market. So at the people that I have talked to recently, I have said, okay, so, Miami, if the presidents are for them and the network probably, they're a lock, right? They're a lock to be in the Big Ten. And the answer is not quite, because Miami doesn't control their own destiny. Big Ten target is number 1, North Carolina, which I don't think they're going to get for lots of reasons. Internal politics, the board of governors at the state of North Carolina don't want to waste your time. I just don't think Big Ten is going to get North Carolina. So, and the other big target, of course, is Notre Dame. So, but Miami, after that, I think is in the catbird seat. And I think one of the great advantages I don't know about I don't think the SEC, I don't think ESPN wants there to be any opportunity for the Big Ten to grab a Miami and a Florida State and have that blend. I don't think they want that to happen. Now, the Florida State Big Ten isn't, we talked about this, Mark. The Big Ten presidents are not going to, maybe they can warm up to a Florida State. Maybe that can all happen, but it isn't there yet and all that. But I don't think the SEC wants that Miami-Florida State thing to happen in the Big Ten. Another reason why people that I talk to believe it's going to be a big scoop by the SEC. And then it goes to Notre Dame. And the question is, can Notre Dame keep going the way they're going are they going to be able to fulfill their obligations to NBC? If they cannot, then they're probably going to be looking at the Big Ten. It pretty much is their only option. And then that opens it up for Miami in a possible Stanford situation. But Miami is Miami's in a very good spot for the Big Ten.
You just brought up the school I was going to next.
Yeah.
So real quick, before we leave Florida State, I'm sure you saw the articles that came out. This was probably 6 months ago, where I didn't realize, and I assume it was a Dellinger, a McMurphy, I forget, to credit the right writer that I found, just some of the anonymous quotes that were being stated by athletic directors, board of regents, high-end people in the Big Ten in a derogatory fashion about Florida State seemed to be pretty stunning, just in regards to their lack of respect for Florida State.
Yeah. And I've heard, as you know, Mark, because you and I have talked about it off camera. Unfortunately, all that was true. Um, there isn't, again, Florida State is an unbelievable brand, an incredible fan base, massive, to the point where they're going to be able to get to where they need to go. You cannot stop that. There's no, they're going to be able to get to where they need to go. How they get there may be a crooked line. They're not the number one targets for the Big Ten. Not back then, not now. But I don't think they can be stopped. I think they're going to get to where they need to go. I don't think it's going to be in the Big Ten, but I don't think the SEC is going, and I don't think ESPN is going to risk a chance of that happening either.
And certainly for us that just care about the football and whatever cultural fit or football fit still exists with Rutgers playing UCLA, where it's been completely messed up. Nothing says Big Ten like a Rutgers Washington game, but Florida State and Clemson, they regularly schedule non-conference games against the SEC. Obviously, they're in the territory. Yeah. It makes sense. Two quick notes, Greg, on Florida State that I find interesting as well is I looked at the last 20 or 25 years of AAU votes and to see how often that occurred, because I was very unfamiliar with the process, but that voting process, first of all, it's not a every 2-year deal. It's not a set timetable. It's whenever they decide that they want to look at particular schools. Number one. Number two is that Florida State, obviously, they're close. They are in the running. They're in that final round of qualifiers. So they're getting there.
Yeah, they're getting there. Now, there are also other reasons, and we might as well just push the envelope a little bit more here. Again, this is I'm talking. I don't want to put this negativity on Mark Rogers. So
hey, I'm a big boy, Greg. Okay. I'm fine.
So we know the reality that Notre Dame has said no to the Big Ten for many decades. But it's never been a no, slam the door, don't give us another phone call, right? There has been serious talks over the decades. The reason why Notre Dame left Hockey East to join the Big Ten in men's hockey is because Notre Dame did not like the competitive nature of Hockey East, that they had to travel by airplane every time they went on the road, while the other Hockey East programs just had to take a bus. That little bit of uncompetitive advantage took Notre Dame to call evil Big Ten and say, "Can we join you in your men's Big Ten hockey?" And the Big Ten said, "Yeah, let's do this thing," right? Notre Dame, again, this is Greg Flugart talking, so don't send the letters to Mark. Notre Dame doesn't have a good relationship with Florida State for many reasons. One, Notre Dame doesn't like to travel to Tallahassee. Jack Swarbrick has said this publicly. He has said this privately. Notre Dame has said this privately many, many times over. Recently, Notre Dame is the one who sponsored the expansion of Stanford, California, and SMU into the conference, right? Of course, Florida State, Clemson, North Carolina, they did not vote for that expansion because they're looking for the exit ramps. There is so much going on, and so when the Big Ten is looking at future, if we choose to expand this conference to 20 or even beyond, a little bit beyond 20, Notre Dame has to be part of that equation. Does Florida State get us closer to getting Notre Dame? It just doesn't. That is part of this as well. It's just and there's a lot. Notre Dame, when Florida State sued the ACC, before they were able to sue, ACC technically sued Florida State the day before. Technically, they got in there. Notre Dame, a full voting member of the ACC. They said yes, go sue Notre Dame. When this latest scheduling deal between the ACC and this ACC settlement, right? They had, they're trying to. Phillips is trying to figure out a way to keep Florida State happy, not to keep Florida State happy, but to get Florida State out of the courts, to get Clemson out of the court. Okay, so they had this scheduling agreement between Florida State, Clemson, Miami, and Notre Dame. Well, Notre Dame wanted this badly because they're struggling to fulfill the obligations to NBC, to get the highest paid payout possible by NBC. So they're saying, yeah, let's do this thing. But the agreement is Notre Dame is going to play Clemson every year, not Florida State, Clemson. They don't want to play Florida State. So it's even in that. Notre Dame is like, okay, we'll have to take Florida State because so many eyeballs are on that because they're such an incredible brand, but we're going to play Clemson more than we're going to play Florida State. And the Big Ten knows all this. So that is another reason why there's hesitancy to there are, Miami is a higher target for the Big Ten than Florida State. It's just there's not one person that I talk to that would say differently, that I talk to personally. It doesn't mean that Miami is a bigger brand than Florida State, because they're not. They're not as valuable as brand as Florida State, but there's other things that are in the mix. Politics, culture, location, academics, research, and just personal relationships are a big part of it.
Folks, Greg Pflugar is here, and you can catch him on a regular basis, of course, on his YouTube channel, College Football Peek Around the Corner. So if you're not familiar, you can get this stuff from Greg directly on a regular basis. And I appreciate, Greg, of course, you stopping by to educate me and everyone else. And it's a great conversation. So before I move on to Stanford, one other note about Florida State, just to confirm your opening statement about the brand and how strong it is. People are looking at 2-10. Folks, just consider that Florida State had what I believe were the second best TV ratings in the conference, even in a 2-10 season. It might have been second or third best TV ratings compilation in a 2-10 season. So obviously still a strong brand that's followed nationally.
And just one other thing, and I forgot to bring this up, I apologize, but so Notre Dame is big on travel, right? They're a national brand, Notre Dame. They're an independent football program. So when they're trying to figure this stuff out, they really want to be able to get to a place, easy. They want to be able to, and when you're looking at, Tallahassee is a place that they have complained about. And there's not much, it's not much Florida State can do about that. I mean, they can try to rebuild that airport and everything, but in the Big Ten, when you're talking about Piscataway to southern Los Angeles, you're talking about, you want direct flights everywhere. You want to be able to get there quickly. Well, Miami, direct flights everywhere, right? There's another location in an ACC school, I think, we all got to keep an eye on, that might be part of a possible expansion for the Big Ten, is Atlanta with Georgia Tech.
Okay.
So just putting that out there. I mean, this is what the Big Ten wants. They want big markets, get in and out. We're a big national thing, and that's what Notre Dame wants. Another reason why Florida State is not above Miami in the pecking order for Big Ten.
Very good. I was going to throw out Duke basketball and the impact there, and Atlanta with Georgia Tech, and obviously a great NFL city. The market's exploding and has been for a couple decades. But you brought up Stanford, and I was just about to go there, because from the time that this started to unravel now 3 or 4 years ago, I immediately went to Stanford and thought that was going to be a Big Ten target And I was dead wrong at the time, and maybe it'll end up that way. But I just figured, and I know people roll their eyes and think nobody shows up at the games. They've gone 3-9 for about 12 straight years, it seems. But we're only a decade removed from Stanford going on a 7 or 8 year run that was top 5 in the nation. You can win there. And just the endowment and the prestige of the university and all of that, it just, especially in this new age, just screams Big Ten to me.
They have been Stanford's been a Big Ten target, but there's always something getting in the way. I mean, Fox wasn't willing. I mean, Kevin Warren wanted to add Stanford in California, and Fox said no. And Kevin Warren was too out in front of his skis and had terrible relationship with Fox at the end and all that stuff. One issue about Stanford, and it's the same with Duke, is they have their own research consortium going on. They're part of a different research world. And I don't think there has been even hesitancy on Stanford's side, in which do they really want to join the Big Ten consortium on research. So that has been one of those backroom type of situations, unlike a Miami and a Georgia Tech that would fold in quickly with the Big Ten consortium. Duke and Stanford are connected. So that is one issue. The Duke basketball brand is huge. It's a big plus for them as a possible candidate. I think the Big Ten would have to expand even more for them to be included. And of course, that all has to do with Notre Dame. And of course, Notre Dame is going to have a big voice in this, right? What they want. And if they say, we got to bring Stanford in, because they sponsored Stanford into the ACC. But for now, we even have Miami ahead of Stanford just because of the latest that the Big Ten presidents are. They look at Miami, even though it's a small private university, Southern Florida, culturally they're Big Ten. The market is big. They want that diversity of that market. And they look at the university, they look at Miami as a Big Ten institution.
How likely do you think we're headed toward a true Big Ten SEC dominated sport? Of course, they unofficially dominate it right now. And who's going to get left out? And I'll add this addendum to it, Greg, because this is what fascinates me as well, would be this situation. North Carolina, Miami, Clemson, Florida State, maybe somebody else, or maybe 2 other schools get plucked up by the SEC and the Big Ten. Will the ACC be able to maintain what is going to be kind of a high-end American conference look with the Wake Forest and the Boston Colleges of the world and Syracuse, and maintain something? And how we would deal with that from a playoff standpoint in football, I don't know. But anyway, like a 10 or 12 team ACC. Or does the Big 12 swoop in and the likes of NC State, Louisville, those next tier schools of football playing ability and cachet, how attractive are they to the Big 12? And is the ACC going to be able to hold together something, or will the Big 12 just pick the rest apart, and then Wake and others will just have to run for the hills and hope that they latch on with the American Conference, I guess?
Yeah, it's very it's very difficult. I can't even come up with a guess. One of the questions I have I can't get an answer to is, let's just pretend that that SEC poaches the ACC for next year. And let's say they grab 4 schools. Let's just pretend that happened. And each of those 4 schools are paying out $147 million each. Okay. And according to the ACC bylaws, they have to have that money ready to pay out 30 days after they officially become a member of another conference. So that would be July 1st, July 30th of the following year. So that's 147 million out of 4 schools. We're just pretending that happened. How does that 147 million dollars times 4? And I'm not good at math, Minnesota math, not good. But what's 147 times 4? How did that money?
I think we're around 188 if I did that correctly.
147 times 4, 147 million.
Oh, it's well, 140 and 40, 640, so
548. 545.
Yeah, 14 and 4 is 560. There we go.
Okay.
588.
Okay. How does that money get distributed, Mark? I mean, we don't know if that's going to be like, do you have to remain a member of the conference to keep getting that money during the years? And so that's going to affect the decision making of a Louisville, a Virginia Tech, whoever doesn't get poached, right? So the Big 12 may have an advantage, may not have an advantage. And then when they did this ACC settlement deal, we don't know all the particular, like there had to been some language somewhere where a Boston College, a Syracuse, a Wake Forest, they got some security out of this, not just the exit dollars, but some sort of like confirmation from ESPN that, you know, if enough of us hang together, we'll be okay. I mean, the ACC network's going to get destroyed. The value of that is going to be, that's going to be a tough thing for ESPN because they're actually making money on that currently. So it's hard to know the survival percentage of the ACC when you don't know how the exit money is going to be distributed. I got a feeling that it's going to be like not front loaded, but back loaded to try to keep the Virginia Techs, the Louisville, the Pittsburgh, keep them in the conference. But if we could find out that answer to that question, then I think we could figure out the possible survival percentage of some sort of ACC surviving.